Hello and welcome to the Level Design Podcast. In this episode we have invited Max Pears back. We get to design the vistas and measure the metrics of Cyberpunk 2077 and then dive into his Let's Design Exploration book. Let's get exploring. Hello and welcome back to the Level Design Podcast. In this episode we have some wonderful guests that we've been wanting to have back on the show. The wonderful and lovely Max Pears with beautiful green eyes, I've been told to tell you, and no money was exchanged in me having to tell you this. Welcome, Max. Thank you for coming back.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, we won't say money was exchanged, otherwise you've got to put hashtag ads and all that stuff.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Legal reasons.
Yeah, promoted.
This is what I want to be known for. It's just my green eyes. Nothing more, guys. Yeah. Nothing more. A simple man.
And last time you were on the show, we talked about your previous book, Let's Design Combat, which is it's a really awesome little book, and I can't wait to get my hands on the physical version because I think the physical version is really cool. And now we're going to be talking about Let's Design Exploration, but also about a little game that you worked on. I hear it's doing the rounds. People have been playing a little bit of it. It's not like the most massive release of last year, like Cyberpunk 2077, and we can finally talk about the level design of this game. We've been dying to do this for months since you were on this show.
Yeah, no, it's great to be able to finally talk about it and talk about the team's hard work that's gone into this and the design process that goes into this, and be able to talk with you amazing people as well. Again, less green eyes, but still amazing in your own special way. So it's nice to be able to have you pick my brain and pick your brains and go behind the curtain a bit.
That's amazing. Joining me in this exploration and journey through the valleys, and I've been reading the book, so I keep on thinking about clear spaces and measurements, but is the wonderful Johnny Wilson from Freelance. From Freelance
Land is my new island I live on.
It's a really big company. It's like AAA. It's got so many people working at Freelance. And also,
I'm duplicating myself. That's it. Duplicate myself is fine.
Oh man, if I figure that out one day, that'd be amazing. And the lovely Rob McLachlan from the Chinese Room. Yay!
Hello.
That's the fun. And green eyes or blue eyes? I think you're the blue-eyed guy here, right?
I've got blue eyes, yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Well, now we've cleared all that up. Let's get on with it. Actually get on with talking. Well, thank you. One of the things that blows my mind, I have to give a bit of a background, and I'm sorry if I'll bore you and it'll be like old man talking. One of my first entries into kind of role-playing games, D&D, was Cyberpunk 2077, the actual book. And I've got the original book here somewhere, and I haven't been able to find it since the game was announced. And I'm just furious because I know that they go for a lot of money on eBay and stuff like that. So having now, many years later, one of the designs on the game is just mind blowing to me. And it's a mind blowing game. I mean, other people have done better reviews that could possibly give it, but it's expansive, right? So you having written a book on exploration, but it's not a small game, right? And from a level design point of view, how do you design at that scale?
Yeah, so no, it's been a very fascinating process to think about. How do you take, especially you talked about there, the original role-playing book, the inspirations from there, and trying to translating that into 3D, into a space that players can actually move through. So it was definitely a challenge for us there, but being able to work with the creator of the original and picking his brain upon what is it that he believes is the most soul parts of the franchise, as well as having incredible teammates. We were lucky to have two urban designers. One of them is called Jay. She is a phenomenal just overall designer, and not just her, obviously environment artists, quest designers. There's so many people. I'm going to miss teams here, which I will get
we'll put the credits of the game
all the way through.
All the way through, just so you can and him.
So no, it's it's a lot to think about, but I think the thing that we kind of wanted to focus on is showing you how the world, because it's an alternative reality. It's not our world that we live in. It's
Right.
things have changed, especially the other role-playing game, Cyberpunk 2020, released a little bit before, if I'm correct, the game launched, and you can see how the world has deviated from our timeline and how that's
Right.
kind of what we want to show, that not only in that of the architecture, but in the characters, the conversations you have, the technology we have there. And it's been, a lot of detail by a lot of incredible and smart people to push that forward.
That's right. I mean, Cyberpunk itself, I mean, is kind of born out of Blade Runner, which is also this, I would just say, this alternative reality that's spawned off from the early tech of the 80s or like late 80s, I think. And
So William Gibson.
yeah, all the William Gibson stuff.
Yeah.
And of course, the aesthetic is something that we now go like, yeah, but you just have a mobile phone rather than like some big, whatever you call it, like CRT and stuff like that. But all the time I'm like, no, that's fine. Just go with it. That's the best aesthetic, But so yeah, going back to the areas that you worked on that. What's the kind of CD Projekt Red process to like defining? I don't know. Do you define it by areas? Do you define it by like how do you get that scale? How do you unitize? Is that a word?
Unify.
Unify big areas. How do you like have areas that are like combat areas and what have you?
Sure. So again, like each process is slightly different depending on like the quest you're either working on, whether it be for open world, main quest, side quest. There are some slight, deviations just from the path, just because of production, time, all those things, and also your approach is going to be slightly different versus that of the more. I don't use the word linear because we have multiple paths even in the main quest, but you tend to know where the player is kind of going to be funneled in versus open world, where someone might come in from all these different angles, and you have the freedom of that. But the very first thing for us in any like form is understanding the narrative. Like narrative is king here at CD Projekt Red. Honestly, it's about giving great stories. What the company did with CD Projekt with Witcher and that franchise. We really want to translate and bring it across. So first, understanding the narrative, either that being in the section of the world or through that of the missions as well, is the first place to start. You'll have like great narrative and quest designers figuring that out.
And like the areas are going to be defined.
story.
Yeah, the areas will be defined by, for example, different. I was going to say tribes, but not tribes of people, but kind of gangs and
gangs,
like,
income levels, all of
Right.
that. Like and it's inspiration from, like I said, our own world. You have these, especially in America, gated communities versus that of the more urban districts. And sadly, we are seeing more of this divide in terms of wealth and split, and you can see that in the world, the architecture, and so you think of that as well, kind of dividing the space up from that as well. So there's a lot to think about there. Again, the occupants of it, like you said, who is in control here? Like we've seen a lot of elements where it's not necessarily just governments, but there is also that of corporations being able to start to control things,
Right.
private militias, all of these. So you're taking a lot from that. And I said, it starts to cipher through the teams, and we start to like pick it out in our own discipline, what that means. As talked about earlier with narrative and quest, their focus is the story. It is delivering that narrative through conversations, characters we may meet, character artists, then taking that a step further into the details of how these people look. And then myself with the urban planners, environment artists, and other concept artists work on the overall look and feel of these spaces that the player is going to be able to occupy, visit, and move through. So each of us, again, picking out the main themes and then deciphering it into our own kind of discipline from there. Now, again, it takes a humongous effort from many incredible people to figure this all out. So we have to have multiple meetings, show off for reviews, iterate constantly in order to improve there. But again, great set of people, and figuring out what it means in your discipline is like a high concept level of what we do.
Right. So
That's something quick there. Obviously, when you're doing that stuff and you're figuring out the space, at what point do you start figuring out the approach? because obviously in Cyberpunk you play as you want, right? That's one of the immersive sides of it. Is I could be running, going home, running, take everyone out, or I want to be stealthy. I want to be a hacker.
Yeah.
Like, do you have to try and support, obviously, and I know this is hard just in game dev in general, do you have to try and support like every eventuality, or do you have like a rule set for how you go about, right, this level of support these three, or at least primarily these three paths?
So we tend to do it in sort of like you said, three kind of the core concepts in terms of the play styles from your solo, techie, and netrunner. But you might vary up. Okay, so if I'm a netrunner, there might be like special doors I can open for one level. The next level we look at other abilities where maybe it's heavily security cameras, or maybe we're coming through a loading bay so we can use vehicles. So we kind of, again, like I said, narrow it down to the routes that we can have, but then start to push further. Well, what like gameplay can we use from that? So when we bring that in, though, mate, to answer your first question, is once we've got the information from narrative and quest, that's when we'll start to have a kickoff meeting with them. As I said, figure out what they find the most important, speak with the urban designers and concept artists first to then talk about what is it, which district is it in, what kind of architecture is in that district. As I said, if it's more of a poor area, then a warehouse probably doesn't mean something high tech like you'd see in the city center. It might be something more abandoned or run down. Architecture a bit more simple versus that of like more expensive materials as well. So we start to look at that. Obviously, environment artists come along with us as well, bringing their knowledge. And from there, we start to kind of plan it out in terms of what the space is going to be, research, reference. And once we've got that, that's when we'll start to do our like paper design or your first block out. And that's when we start to add it in. Okay, we now know what it is. We've got the concept of it. I have a rough style. We figured that out. Okay, well, now let's start to push in these kind of play styles and what kind of each path will offer in a different perspective. So hopefully each play style feels a little bit different from that there. And it is a challenge, honestly, like to still offer stealth and cover to go straight into combat is you see most games focus on one or the other, because to master these elements, obviously it takes a lot of iteration time and incredible team members. So for us trying to combine it, it was definitely a big challenge for us for that.
I have a really sort of fundamental question about the kind of the coming together of the game. Now I feel a bit like I don't have much knowledge here, because obviously Johnny, you've worked on open world games, and Max, you've worked on open world games. I've never worked on an open world game of that scale.
Okay.
And I find it difficult in even a linear single player game to identify the point at which you really understand the game you're making. Now, I guess you guys had the thing of the Cyberpunk IP, and all the rule books and stuff to have, and also your experience working on The Witcher. But how long did it take you to reach a point where you really start to understand what game you were making?
So this really ranges from project to project. Like, I feel back when I worked in Division, I felt I understood Division's kind of overall what was going to be the end product quicker than I did Cyberpunk. And that's just simply because I don't want to use the word it was simpler, because it wasn't. It was a different style of game, but more like it's clear the core pillars were much more kind of defined from combat, multiplayer, and New York. Those are the strong three key pillars for that game, right? So New York is a city you can visit on Google Maps, let alone take a plane over there. Cyberpunk was a little bit different because, again, you're still adjusting what kind of each play style is as well, right? Like, at some point, we're waiting for mechanics to come through, or maybe things are going to get changed, as anything does in development. But I think the thing with Cyberpunk for me, it was probably, we worked on a vertical slice, and it was before the first E3 announcement for us then. And that's when it started to come together. Like, don't get me wrong, not everything was in there, or like things, again, changed or were tweaked. But that's when it started to figure out, oh, okay, like, you can do this in so many ways, and that's the appeal of it, right? Like, that is the focus, especially as me as a level designer. The focus is offering choice, which can be one of the most freeing things in terms of like a level design, because you have so much to play with. but it also can be one of the scariest things because you're overwhelmed and you're like, okay, do we do it like this? And we changed our approach a couple of times from what the level design approach, like you need to do it X, Y, and Z, but then it changed because it wasn't as engaging, or like you didn't have as much kind of options. So it took time, but again, it all comes down. I think it comes down from great leadership, and that's a really big thing that I think, especially when you have hundreds of people working on it. If we say giant robot, all four of us are going to think of a different giant robot, like just how it goes. But I was watching a great talk by Rob Davis on GDC. I think it's free on YouTube now. But if you see there, like the high team, higher ups there, all gave them like this really nice bound book explaining what each like pillar was, what that pillar meant in detail, what that pillar meant in terms of combat, exploration, really breaking it down to help answer those questions. So I think the big thing for anyone who's working on that is like figure that, like find that information as fast as you can, because it's, again, sadly, as we all know, the first thing to break is communication on any project, on any team size. So making sure you have that information straight away can really help, just, again, open your eyes to what the vision is. And I always like to say, like, if you're pitching a mechanical level, and if it doesn't hit at least 2 out of the 3 pillars, don't bother pitching it, because it's not in theme with that game. So it took me, like I said, it took me longer for Cyberpunk to figure it out. But once it did, you could start to see it slowly kind of come together and click in your mind. But again, great leadership, great planning, core pillars are super important to figuring that out. Otherwise, you're kind of swimming in shark-infested waters, waiting for mistakes to happen.
Yeah, you'll end up herding cats most of the time, trying to then say like, no, that's not what I meant. It meant this. And if you then spend like however many years saying that, I'm sure you just jump out of a damn window, right?
Well, it's like you said, mate, when you were talking about like defining terms, right? Like that's super important. Like I'm trying, and it sounds pretentious, and I really don't mean to sound pretentious here, guys. Like I said, emerald green eyes. How can I be pretentious? But it's more like someone said to me, the best one is like, stop using the word fun, because fun means different things. Right. How do you measure fun? And like, it's not like it's a bad word, but if I come up to any of you guys, I'm like, hey man, this isn't really fun. That doesn't help you figure out what's missing. So again, it takes time to get to that, and I still haven't figured it out. And again, I'm not trying to sound pretentious. It's, again, just be specific in guiding and communicating with everyone.
I found this as well, so moving it slightly away from Cyberpunk, in conversations about games, someone says, oh, this is like a so-and-so game. Bioshock is a big one that people say. And we're like, how is it like Bioshock? That's such a, again, like fun's not defined. Like, how is it like Bioshock? Like, if we're doing a comparative, like in the conversations, like, is it like first person? Is it because it's horror? Is it underwater? What about it is? So I've when we're working, I try to say, okay, if you it's like a Dark Souls thing. It's like what? Define it. Yeah. Be able to quantify it, to narrow it down. Otherwise, people just make suppositions or take leaps, and as you say, fill in the blanks in ways that you don't want to do it.
And that's another great point you're saying there, mate. Like, we've gotten to this weird place where we think like camera defines our genre when it should have never done. Because like when I was trying to explain Cyberpunk and I was like first person perspective, everyone's like first person shooter. I'm like, no, because there's more to it. Like, you have melee combat, you do interact, not like you have conversation with people. And like for some reason, in cinema you have all these different shots to help improve the story. No one goes to a cinema and goes, oh yeah, it's a Christopher Nolan medium shot film. And like we oversimplified it. Like third person, first person, these are all tools to help us tell a story. It shouldn't be the defining part of a genre. So yeah, mate, I completely agree.
Another thing I wanted to ask you is like, how much, I mean, again, defining the terms. I'm now going to be like checking myself, trying to ask open-ended questions, but being really specific, which is really difficult. Well, one of the things I noticed was that even though it's very open world, you can essentially go anywhere, or that's what it feels like. But there's a lot of cheating, because there's some missions that you don't realize, but you're taken there by the story, right? It's like, I think to be fair, it's like one of the first missions. You're taken to an apartment to go and rescue somebody,
Yep.
right? And you're in an open world game, but you've literally the only place you can go is up there and do this and do that. So, how do you choose? How much cheating is there going on, and how do you plan for that?
Yeah. So again,
I don't mean cheating, by the way. I just want to clarify. I don't mean cheating.
You mean guidance, right? Well,
Yeah. Let's go for guidance.
Yeah. So,
Terms, people. Terms.
I think the big thing for us is like there's so much of that city for you to explore, right? And in most open world games, players probably won't see all of the worlds, just down to the fact that of time. Some people focus more on main stories than they do on side content. There's so many factors that go into it. But like for us, I think it's about wanting to help navigate through the world. And when you are going on your way to these points in these missions, whether that be some apartment to rescue someone or the spot where you're going to talk, there are still elements of the world that's happening around you, that's living, which you can get distracted by if you choose to, or you can ignore it. And that's, again, another big thing is figuring out, like, I think it was the term was, and I could be wrong with the term, so I hope I'm not wrong with it, is like, distance for distraction, where you're measuring how many seconds do you go before something should appear or something should happen.
Gotcha, right.
10 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. Most open world games will do this and they'll have like a different term again for it, but I think that's a way to cause it. And
when
like
you say a distraction, what do you mean? Like,
so distraction
to draw you off the main path, or
yes,
is this just an event?
Yes, so a distraction can come in many different forms. It can be like a POI, point of interest, side mission. It can be just in terms of like you might hear a conversation that's happening. You might find some. It can come in any different form of like what you provide in your open world in terms of that there. So you might, it can happen in different ways. It can happen with something might pop up on your mini map. So you might get a call from a different character. You might hear a conversation with a character in the world. So there's all different ways to get the attention, but it's all encompassing open world activities. We mean and refer to it when we talk about the distraction. And we don't use distraction as a negative. Like I said, we want to, if you go off and do that, that's perfectly fine. And like we decide again, hey, if this is a really important story beat, then we'll either not have any distractions on the route, or maybe we have a bigger time difference for you to move to that point so you don't get it along the way. So again, it's all deciphering, talking to different teams. We have open world teams, we have quest teams, and just coming together to make sure those elements are like clear what's important to us in that moment.
And do you count the process of reminding the player and drawing them back onto the main quest or story path? Do you count that under that distraction system?
We do, and it's still something that it's an interesting way on how to figure out how to best convey that, whether that be a call from the character that you're supposed to meet, whether that be something like a text, or maybe we try to have something similar to where you have certain radio stations or podcasts on there that you can listen to, and maybe they might be commenting on an event that you caused later on. So like, even subconsciously while the world's happening, it might trigger you to be like, oh, yeah, that was me. I should probably go do something to progress the story. So it can come in different ways for that, and balancing the game as well, because of open world, RPG, different levels is a big part of that as well, because you want the players to level up in order to get the balance right with that mission through as well. So yeah,
I remember walking around, and I think I was just doing the usual farting around Night City, and then I was like, oh, there's a fight around the corner. You should totally inspect that fight, because I can't remember if the mechanic, and I apologize, I'm here with one of the people that wrote it, but it's like I think you can get like level up on being a good guy because you saved somebody. I can't remember the chase by the police, and I was like, hold on a minute, like, do you think this just happened because it was going to happen, or is this a mission? I kind of like that. I like that mechanic, that methodology of going like, all right, you've been doing nothing, let's get you into the game and progressing, right?
And it helps the world feel alive as well,
right?
When you try and do an open world there, is you want it to feel that, you know, we talked about movies earlier, but like the great thing about films obviously is you can control what the viewer sees. So you don't, everything is dead behind that camera. You like, we talk about the mess in our rooms behind our cameras now. You don't see it. But like compared to video games where a player can turn at any point, we need to make sure that the world is still living. We need to make sure the events are still happening. People are still exploring. Populations are still going off there. So it's a really important thing, again, to make sure the world feels alive for the player.
This is interesting. How much? Because the previous time we talked, you were writing a little book about combat, and you've been working on the combat arenas for Cyberpunk 2077. I'm gonna just call it Cyberpunk from now on. Okay.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah, fine. We know which year it was in. All right. Just Jesus. But now you've written another book, which is called Let's Design Exploration. Right. So was that at the same time? Were you writing both books at the same time and going like, oh, this goes in that book and this goes in this book, or putting in different folders, or what was the process for that?
So it's slightly different. I think I was like, I didn't know how well the first book was obviously going to do, or like if people were even interested in the book, because I wrote combat at the time because like it was an element I was weak at, and it was where I was like, man, I need to be better at this, and like really, you know, there wasn't a huge amount of resources out there. I'm sure there might be more that I might have missed, but like I couldn't find them, and especially I was just like, man, why for such a big thing, to say most AAA console games have some form of combat in them, why like wasn't there much there for me to explore and learn from?
And this is the best thing for
game.
Right, and this is the thing about content, right? And I'm just going to be a bit meta here. Aside from your podcast, I didn't see much level design podcast or content that I could do. So I started getting into it, and then went, well, let's do a panel, and then that grew into a podcast. You know, because I couldn't find it out there. So just if you want to create something, if you don't find something, that's what you can create, right?
For sure, man. And there's like, you guys have done an incredible job. I love like listening to your work here, guys. You're doing incredible, and it's crazy to think how many more great game dev and level design elements have come out since we all started doing this. You know, I'm not calling anyone a copycat, but there are no, I'm messing. Incredible people doing different things. You know, so
absolutely
like, great. And again, that's it's a big inspiring thing, because like the combat, like I was like, okay, I need to be better at this. I have done a lot. Let's try figure it out. And I started to realize the elements that was making my combat better, stuff that can improve it. Like there was a really great moment. I worked on the final kind of like boss battle for the Nomads route, in which you go off and use your tank and have a battle there. But you need to get out to go activate this kind of like this door in order for you to progress. And then it was in this area, like you had to reuse the space 3 times. And I was just like, all right, like, and I did it in like a day and a half. It was very quick, and like, you shouldn't do a block out, just for the record, for anyone, in a day and a half. Let me make that avidly clear. But like, time was of the essence, and I was like, I was so nervous as well. I was like, oh my God, this is going to be rubbish. And it's just putting myself down. And I was like, all right, let's just make the worst level I can. And I just made it. And it ended up being very good, you know, just because of the fact that I had been learning that combat stuff on the side. I was figuring it out. And it kind of came as the amalgamation of all of that hard work into there, to the point when we had like a great designer called Jacek, who came on to review all the combat, who's really smart LD that worked at Techland previously before joining us. And I was very fortunate where he's like, don't change anything. The combat here is very good. Great. And I was
awesome.
Just like, but again, yeah, exactly. Mom, Dad, we made it. I'm amazing. But no, like, again, it just came from learning all that stuff and studying.
I mean, I think I've always tried to say to people, if you want to learn a subject really well, go and present it or write a book on it. Like in this case, like I'm not belittling your book. Your book is very light. It could be a really good presentation, for example, like, you know, learn presentation. Once you do that, because you're getting ready for the questions that you'll be posed, right? You think you know something until you're going to present something or write it down, and then you go, oh, but they're going to ask about this, so I better have all these answers ready. It's like a better than an exam, I think, because it makes you know it. And was this a process for the exploration book? Because you have some experience with open world, so I was wondering if the exploration book came out the same way.
Yeah, so for me, it was one of the ones where I was just. We talked about there. Were you saying, Rob? Like some careers, you don't ever work on certain genres of games or certain types of it, and I kind of envy the designers who work on the linear stuff, like because it's easier, because it's not, but you get to spend that time really fixating over.
You get the focus. Like
Yeah.
you hone in on a very specific aspect of the game, and you do that for a
Exactly.
year or something.
And with open world, you don't get that. You have to put in, like, you get ways to help guide, but also
Yeah.
you need to understand that players are going to go always do what they want to do, either try to break the game or go off in the opposite direction. But like that again came from me also understanding that it was something I wish I knew back when I was a junior level designer. And I'm a senior now, but again, that doesn't mean I've mastered anything. It just means that I'm better than what I was, but I want people to be better than what I was as a junior. And maybe I'm getting myself out of a job here, but like to be able
No,
to
I mean you have the luck of time is behind you, right? So because there'll be brighter sparks, but they'll never have your experience because you're like years ahead of them, right?
Yeah.
So
but I think it sort of generates a maturity in being able to explain concepts. So like you were saying before about, what does fun mean? It doesn't mean anything really. Whereas having the language to be able to say, well, this is not working for me because this and this and this, that is the quality that seniority brings you.
Yeah. And my emerald green eyes, but like that always been
All
there.
the eyes.
Yeah. But no, like that's it. It's like trying to help share that information as well, because a lot of the time, I'm sure we all had it when we were growing up as well. There wasn't much focus on design in general. You went to these conferences or anything, it was always focused on art or animation, because they're more visually engaging in the sense of like, wow, I can look at a pretty picture. And like I was just talking to Ross, I'm going to mispronounce it, Ross Wilding yesterday. We were talking about portfolios and how do you show that, and we were debating, do you put it up on ArtStation? Not because ArtStation's bad. I think ArtStation offers a lot of incredible stuff, but I don't think it's tailored for a level designer, because it's not about just a pretty picture. It's about, if you can't play it, show a video. If you can't show a video, show a GIF. And if you can't show a GIF, show a picture and then write about it. Because you need to try and translate all that information in an exciting way. Sorry, Jonathan, were you going to say something?
I was going to jump in. It's like you said, show a picture, but I think something to jump off with that is, it's like, you don't want to see a picture of the final thing. We want to see your block out, and if not, we'd like to see multiple images of that block out.
Yes.
Because I think we all spoke about it here before. It's a process, right? Like as a level designer, you go through a process, and it's like if you want to get hired, you get interviews, you'll get a test, and you'll be asked about said process, and you will walk through it, and you will show your understanding. So even similar to what Mark said earlier, if you want to get really good at something, present it, give a talk on it, do a podcast on it. It does really, even having a conversation with someone about it has that similar effect.
Yeah.
I call that the rubber ducky effect in a weird way. Is learning is using one neural path of your brain, but then real embedding that knowledge, you have to use a different neural path. And I call it the rubber ducky effect because I used to have a rubber duck on top of my desk, and if people came to ask me questions, I'd say ask it to him first because I'm busy, and they'd have to then explain the question to a rubber duck, but that forces the different part of your brain to work, right? And 90% of the time they'd have the solution, but that means because you're now turning the problem or the situation on its head and having to do different things with it. And that's the same thing with level design, right? So I think I've talked before about going through a level design backwards, right? So like you're running through your level backwards to see it in a different light. But if you also have to talk to somebody, whether it's a rubber ducky, a camera, a colleague, and explain it, I bet you, like, there'll always be, oh yeah, this bit doesn't work, right? now that you're explaining it, you go like, oh, this bit, oh, actually, I've just gone and fixed it, and the other person hasn't said a word, hasn't done any critique of your level. They've just gone, okay.
Yeah, no, it's a great point, mate. Exactly, just talking about it and trying to see it. Like when I talk about combat, one of the things that I always tried to do was play it as if I was the enemy attacking the player.
Oh,
See if
okay.
there was enough cover for me as an enemy to do it. Is there a flanking route available for the enemy as there would be for me as the player? Like thinking about that. And, sometimes I do a bad guy voice just to really sell it. But yeah, it's a different perspective of thinking. I think that's important.
Yeah, especially I like the like be the bad guy, and just then you can start molding it. The other part of the exploration book, which I really loved, which was in the combat one, and I think this was that, was one. There's one page, and I might not let go, because on the game that we're working on, I did this discovery of a thing. Basically, you go around the corner and you see something, but it gives you a sneak peek beforehand. And I said, it's an exploration book. I was reading the book now, and I was like, yes, yes, vindicated by Max Pears. So unfortunately, Valentina's not here, but I'm going to be showing her that page. Go, see, it's a thing.
No, that's
so thank you.
Yeah, no, but like breadcrumbings, there's no right way to reveal information, right? Like Naughty Dog is always the example of like, oh yeah, we use, they're great for showing weenies, landmarks, and that's incredible. But they don't always do that, and like we don't always have the chance to do that either, because you might be a confined space which doesn't have a giant building to guide you. Or you can only see so much. And again, you got to figure it out. There's still different routes to do it. Again, like in anything, as we all sit here, we've all designed in many different ways. There isn't a right or wrong way to design. It's what helps you and what helps the player is always the most important thing. So yeah, always multiple ways.
And it's also whatever serves the game or whatever you're making, right? Sometimes as you say, having a big building in the background doesn't always make sense if you're trying to get that sense of claustrophobia in one point, and then you have the release. One thing that you had touched on in your book was this, which I was never able to vocalize very well or explain, which was this idea of intensity and like kind of release. Like, so for example, you have a combat area, but then you have a
downbeat for it.
A downbeat. Thank you. That was trying to understand, and now I'm starting to catharsis, right? Because you have an intensity in an area, you have either whatever it is. If it's a whole climbing area or things like that, you then want to have, I don't know. I'm thinking of different games like Tomb Raider. Then you want to have a point that like you're at the top of the hill and you can walk around and you don't have to be looking at what do I climb because combat is a very simple thing for me to always be explaining. But
yeah,
I like that. How often do you think? I guess this is variable. Like, should we be trying to implement that into games? I mean,
yeah, it's hard to give like a rule of thumb, because there's, you and Rob said that is like it depends on the game, it depends on the mission, right? Like it depends on the area. It can't just be like, okay, every 2 beats there should be a downbeat, because if you say like the player's getting ambushed,
right,
like some of those Uncharted combat sections last a long time, because the context is Nate's being surrounded, he's been ambushed, so we need to push the player and make them feel like, oh shit, just how Nate can feel there. But there might be moments where you have a really big lull, like the player feels depressed, the character feels that they have failed, so that there is no combat because the player doesn't feel that they would do well. Or like when the player enters combat, you might restrict some of the mechanics, so again it carries on the emotion of what you're after. But like I think it's always important to have a downbeat at a certain moment. As for how long or how often, you need to figure that one out. But like there's a great like moment where you feel like, so I'll always remember this. Back when I was at university, I was making a level. It was not a particularly great level, but like one of the things that when my lead of the project came over and said, he was like, you've got so many different like either puzzles, combat, one after another, you need to delete. He's like, you need to delete 2 or 3 of them. And I was like, what? Why? These are all so cool. He's like, I'm not saying they're not cool, but there's so much happening. The player has to learn a lot, and then has to like remember and then you've got so much going on. So always remember the player needs a break. It's like if you're training every day, every hour, you're not going to produce your best work. You're going to be tired, fatigued, and eventually going to get knocked out. Like you see a lot of fighters training, but they have their rest days as well because they know they need their body to heal to get the best weapon. So it's the same thing there. I don't have a big rule, but you need to make sure there. And a great way to do that is having a pacing graph. Some people don't like doing pacing graphs, and that's totally fine. Again, you all design differently.
Mm-hmm.
The thing is, for me, though, is you have a great chance to figure out, well, how intense or boring is your level before you even make it, because you get to plot it out through engagements from understanding, okay, combat on an engagement is very engaging because the player has to be, really focused to win. In something like conversation wheels, they can be engaged, but they might not be that engaged. Some people will just skim over some of the lines, skim over the dialogues, and click whatever button. And if it's a cutscene, the player isn't engaged because it's happening in front of them. And so you start to measure that level of engagement, and that's when you can start to plot your points on the graph. But the important thing is you never want a straight line on that graph. You're never going up, down, or across. You always want a wave. And that's always something that's important for anyone when they're making this.
As you say,
sorry, Mark, when you talked about different neural pathways, that is the key of it as well, really, because you can't introduce a new game mechanic really in a point where the player is under extreme stress for other reasons. Whereas that same game mechanic they've been introduced to, several hours previously and used many times since, putting that in the middle of a stressful situation could work very well, because you might be going, well, you're not really thinking it through. You're using a different neural pathway, using some sort of different psychological state to complete that mechanic, and so you do it more by instinct, and the kind of momentum isn't lost. And furthermore, you don't want to bring in something incongruously downbeat in the middle of a sustained period of excitement. In some ways, you don't want the player to stop. You want the player to continue. You want the player to be achieving some sort of momentum, and breaking that momentum will just ruin the experience. So, like you say, Max, it's very context sensitive, isn't it?
Yeah, completely agree, mate. Completely agree. Yeah.
One of the things that we designed into which we worked a lot. Sorry, self-promotion. I'm allowed.
Go for
it. Okay. It's tutorializing some parts of our game. You're being introduced to different mechanics, and there was one of the big choices was playing and playing and playing again. Of course, the problem with being the designer or part of the team is that you've played this bit like 100 times. You know how it works, but each time trying to do a Men in Black, mind flashy thing and going, okay, right, I don't know what game this is. Is this at the right time? Trying to find a tutorial, and have they learned? Is this at the right pace? Should this be sooner or later? Because if you play the game 100 times, you're like, well, this is really easy. It's just like this game, I think that's something that you have to be very aware of. Is like you as a designer, especially in indie teams, right? Because I guess in bigger companies you can just ask somebody else to play it and give you opinions, or see their reaction, or see or record their playthroughs.
Exactly, and it's trying to find someone to see it differently, because what's clear to you might not be clear to someone else, and that's always the hard part. And also probably one of the most heartbreaking moments when someone plays your level and they don't do what you want to do.
Isn't that all the time, or am I just really bad?
I always get that when I'm just playing, I'm demoing my levels, and I'm demoing it to the team and saying, this happens here, this happens here. And then I go, I think, oh no, I've just broken it. It can't possibly happen like that. It's a massive loophole. Everyone could just wander off through that door and it breaks everything. And I'm just sitting there thinking, oh crap. It's I revealed the horrible truth to my rubber duck. In front of everyone.
Well, that's why you should talk to the duck first, my friend.
But it's always important, though, right? To do that, to hopefully find it out before the players find it out, right? Super important to just play test.
Yeah, and I think with this lesson as well, it's like, I think when you're starting out doing your level blockout or something, for the first couple of times, I think it's okay to play test with other designers within your department, but you're only going to get, to me, very surface level information from them, because other designers kind of view levels in the same space, right? If you're working on the same project together, you've kind of got the same wavelength you're thinking on, and the more valuable information always comes as soon as you go out the size of your department. And ideally, you get actual just users like off the street or whatever, and get like non-developers testing it, but that varies in scale of whatever your company is.
Yeah, I think that when you, especially when you get a new member to the team, because obviously you know you have members that come and go, but like getting some fresh eyes can really be like, oh wow. Like I got an example of a level I made, which is called Red Queen's Race, which is a club underground this warehouse, and like. Now when I look at it, I just see the mistake I made like over and over, and the big remedies we went to fixing it versus like if I just had more time. Because like one of the things is a side option you can do is you can talk to the guards to see if you can get permission into the club. But most of the time they'll tell you, you know, peace off, and then you've got to figure it out. But the problem I made with this, because there's 3 entrances to the guards right, you've got some space which just has like a road where you can see where the trucks coming in and out of the warehouse. So if you want to just run through there, guns blazing, you can go for it, right? It's right there in view. The problem is like when you're looking at the guards, look to the left, the walls all the same on like one side, and like you have to go to the left. Like, if you want to go the stealth route, you can go to the left, and then there should be you'll sneak under a vent. But the problem is like I'm expecting the player to follow along a wall, and then turn to the right on there, but they don't see the turning, and that was a huge thing of like, fuck, like because got to cross this bridge first to get to the point you can talk to. If I was to redesign that, I would have pulled the guard outpost forward a few meters, so everything else would be pushed back. So and also the bridge is flat, I would have raised and curved the bridge up so the player has a higher viewpoint in order to see the options to the left and the right.
Gotcha.
And it would have been easier to do. What we did to remedy, because we didn't have time, and I'm an idiot, is like, so there's a way on the right, we have some lights and a crane slightly moving. So if you want to go a certain way to use the solo to go up that way, that'll catch your eye. If you want to go to the left, we had like... It's believable, but it's definitely not realistic. Dude, at one point I had yellow arrows going along the wall, and I was like, this is too much. But like, you have these giant kind of pipes like making a doorway that come out of the building, so it looks like there's an actual frame. And I learned that from, I can't remember which film it was. It's this Hong Kong film where it's about this couple who find out their partners are cheating with one another. Because Hong Kong is obviously such a small place, they're trying to talk to one another and plan, but they kept shooting it through a window or a door, as if like you're feeling nervous that someone might be overhearing that conversation. I really liked that. So by creating this fake door with the pipes, and also we had steam and some flashing sparks as well, it drew the player in. But as I said, if I would have done it again, though, I instantly know, okay, this is how to do it better. This is how to avoid flat walls and, you know, long corners. So it's all process, it's all iterations we talked about. And sadly, you are going to make mistakes and not have the time to fix every one and hodgepodge it, because I don't think the environment artist was the best pleased with my giant pipes.
But at least you didn't have the massive arrows. And like, this is experience, right? It's like you knew that was not the bait to do it. Final question, and this is, you know, very important for you. Like, is Exploration Book out?
It is indeed, mate. You can find this on an ebook through the Gumroad store, or as well as a physical copy as well. We'll put links, I'm sure.
Yeah. We might do. We might not. Yeah. Affiliate links and promotion.
I definitely enjoyed reading it very much. It was a lovely little sort of flick-throughable compendium of just some really key points about how to guide the player through an exploration level. Really, really nice thing to see. Just like. Just to get those key principles really nailed into your mind. Yeah. So good job.
Thank you, man. I'm really glad that you enjoyed it.
This is probably not a light little question. How hard was it to nail it down to just these ones?
Like very hard. Like in anything, you could go into way more detail, and like the thing is that I wanted to always do with these books is like it's not the full course. It's not everything you're going to learn. As we talked earlier, context is so important. So there might be things that you will never use these for, or some you'll have to use nearly every one in and more. So like for me again, I think it was really trying to break it down to, again, some of the most common points, but also some of the most digestible as well, because I don't have much space in terms of text available to me in these type of books. And obviously the image has to sell the point as well. So some I had to cut just due to how do you sell that in a better way? Yeah. So like it was tough. We started off with over, I think 40 something points, and then brought it down to about like 30 or like 27, something around there. And also like the cost in terms to make these books. I know we talk about they're very slim for like certain reasons. It's part of it is the style to be digestible, but like it costs a lot of money to not only make it yourself, but then the cost of printing a book, because it's all in color, which is a really important thing for me, the physical books as well, because we've all seen great LD books, but then they show you figure A, and you can't tell what the picture is. It's black and white. It's a grainy screenshot. And that's not what I wanted. So yeah, it's tough, but like I would love to do more, and there's probably going to be a third one at some point, but like I think I smashed out 2 books in under a year, so I'm not like rushing to get to the third.
You're right, but so what's the next book? Right? Do we get a preview of the next book?
So I think the next book's either going to be about stealth or narrative. I think is where I'm leaning to, like narrative and level design. So I don't know yet, but like those are the 2 that I'm weighing up at the moment.
But you heard it here first, folks. And when you have that book out, and when you've done the next project, we won't talk about the project, we'll talk about the book, and then we'll talk, and we on and on, year in, year out. It's the circle of guests. That's what it is on a level design.
We'll see those green eyes again.
Yeah, we have to do that.
Is that a hashtag ad sponsored by Green Eyes?
Hashtag Green Eyes. Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been an absolute pleasure again. And of course, dear listeners and viewers, if you'd be so kind enough to like and subscribe, and I have to do this, and then like it wherever you get this podcast from, just give us a rating, because it means that other people might find it, and they'll find out about some great books and his beautiful green eyes. So and we have to unleash those upon the world. So thank you very much, and on that note, good night.
Good night.
The Level Design Podcast has been a Command Studio production. Our editor is Matthew Lever, and this episode has been produced by Bridie Rose.